This is the Nvidia RTX 4070 Super. It released back on January the 17th, 2024 for a US MSRP of $599. And today, the model that I'm looking at specifically is the Asus Dual RTX 4070 Super EVO White. And as the name suggests, it is truly an all-white GPU all the way around. Why in the world are we talking about the 4070 Super today? Because today is CES 2025. Today, Nvidia and AMD are getting ready to announce their brand new GPUs to the world. And I know a lot of people are saying, I don't care about the old stuff, I only care about the new stuff. That's true for a lot of people, but that is not true for everyone. As a YouTuber, I get a lot of comments, particularly on my GPU content, and I can tell you firsthand, people wait for the new GPUs to be announced with no interest in actually purchasing a new GPU. And then after the new GPUs get announced, they start looking at the current generation of GPUs and they start watching for price drops and discounts and GPUs showing up on the Facebook Marketplace and eBay and things of that nature. So they're looking for those deals at that point because they know a lot of people are going to rush out to buy the new stuff. Meanwhile, retailers are going to try to get rid of their old and existing inventory. So I understand the strategy. It won't work for everybody and your mileage will vary depending on your market. I get all of that, but that is a real strategy. Trust me, I see it in the comment section all the time. And finally, in addition to all of that, believe it or not, out of all the GPU content I have here on the channel, I've never actually tested a 4070 or a 4070 Super. And so when Asus sent over this 4070 Super for the all-white PC build video, I thought to myself, after I'm done with that all-white PC build, I need to go back and do a dedicated GPU piece on the 4070 Super. Plus, I like to look at GPUs right when they come out, but I also like to look at them a year or two later. And believe it or not, the 4070 Super is actually coming up on 1 year old here pretty soon. So I think the timing is actually pretty good, all things considering. And now with all that being said, let's get into today's video. So we're going to do a very brief unboxing of the card. We're going to talk about the specifications of the card. We're going to talk about all the parts being used in today's benchmark test. And finally, we're going to actually benchmark the card and talk about the gaming performance here. And then finally, we will close out with some final thoughts. Okay, so what all do you get in the box? Well, you will obviously get the GPU itself, the all-white Asus Dual RTX 4070 Super EVO. You will get one adapter cable that will help you take your traditional 8-pin power connectors for a GPU and connect them to the Nvidia 40 series cards, which require a 16-pin power connector. And finally, you get a thank you card from Asus as well as a quick start guide. And now let's talk about the specifications of the GPU. Okay, so this is the Nvidia RTX 4070 Super. It has 12 gigabytes of GDDR6X VRAM. The memory interface bus width is 192-bit, and it has a total of 7,168 CUDA cores. It also offers 4th generation Tensor cores, 3rd generation RT cores, therefore offering full ray tracing support, 1 NVENC encoder, 1 AV1 encoder. It has support for Nvidia's DLSS 3.5 with ray reconstruction technology. It also offers frame generation on games that support it. The GPU supports PCIe 4.0 by 16, and it also has 1 HDMI 2.1a port and 3 DisplayPort 1.4a ports. The total graphics power, or TGP, is 220 watts. The recommended power supply for this GPU is a 750 watt power supply. It does require the use of a 16-pin power connector. And now here are some specifications that are more specific to this particular model from Asus. So the 4070 Super EVO offers a dual BIOS with a physical switch on the GPU. It offers a performance mode and a quiet mode. The performance mode runs colder and gives you a higher clock speed, while the quiet mode aims to offer you a more quiet system overall. Now, speaking of performance, this is an overclocked model out of the box, and so by default, it's already boosting to 2520 megahertz out of the box, but in the overclock mode, it will boost to 2550 megahertz, but actually, as you'll see in our testing later in this video, we can even clock a little higher than that. Now, speaking of quiet, Asus is also advertising their 0 dB technology. Basically, when the GPU temperature falls below 50 degrees, the fans on the GPU will simply stop, therefore eliminating all noise completely from the GPU. Now, I will show the dimensions on the screen right now of this GPU, but this particular model is a 2.5 slot design, so it's not a big card at all. In fact, one of the marketing points for this card is small form factor ready for the enthusiast crowd. There are a lot of small form factor PC cases out there that this card would be perfect for, but obviously you don't have to put it in a small form factor case because I just put it into a very big case in my previous video in the all-white PC build. Now the backplate on this GPU is aluminum, and there is a cutout or a vent on this backplate to allow for proper airflow and for hot air to escape out the back of the PC case. Now right there with the I/O of the card, there is something called a mounting bracket, and Asus is claiming they have made this more durable and sturdy by beefing it up with 304 stainless steel. The main benefit here is that it is now more resistant to corrosion over time. Now one of the words in the GPU name is dual for Asus Dual, and that is because it offers a dual fan design. And these dual fans have a dual ball bearing design, which are supposed to last up to 2 times longer than traditional sleeve bearing designs. Additionally, these two fans also use Asus's AxleTech fan design, which basically means they have longer blades, a barrier ring, and all of this helps to increase downward air pressure. Basically, it means better thermals. And now we need to talk about all the PC parts used in today's benchmarks. The short version is, it's the white PC build from my last video. Here are all the parts on the screen. And for anybody complaining about the CPU choice here, please note that number one, I actually have a subscriber who specifically requested me to test the 4070 Super with the 7700X. And number two, according to the Black Ops 6 built-in benchmark, there is a 0% bottleneck here. Now today's benchmarks are just like all my other benchmarking videos. There are no graphs here. This is real-time gameplay, so there's no OBS recording, there's no Nvidia overlay recording. I have an external capture card to capture all the data here, so this is as accurate as it can possibly get. On the left hand side of the screen you will see native 1440p resolution, and on the right side of the screen you will see native 4K resolution, and almost all of the games were tested at ultra quality preset. I will let you know if that is not the case on a particular benchmark. All of these benchmarks will be using native rendering, so that means native resolution, no dynamic scaling resolution, no upscaling of any kind, no frame generation, and no ray tracing. The one exception here will be Forza Horizon 5, simply because the maximum quality preset on that actually includes built-in ray tracing, and the 4070 Super handles it quite well. Now the other thing to know here is that the 4070 Super is positioned as a 1440p card. Can it do 1080p? Of course. Can it do 4K? Yeah, a little bit, but it is positioned as a 1440p card, and so those are the results that we're mostly concerned with today. However, with that being said, I didn't just want to show you 1440p, and so between 1080p and 4K, I chose to show you 4K. And now one point of clarification before the benchmarks, I'm not trying to run too long here, but the reason why I run my benchmarks the way that I do is simply because I have been running benchmark videos for a few years now, and I have spoken to many people in the community, and the general consensus is that most people want to see native rendering. They want to see raw rasterization, because most people understand if I need more frame rate, I can simply enable DLSS or frame generation in games that support it, and I can lower the in-game settings. Most people understand that. However, on the other hand, technologies like frame generation and upscaling like DLSS, for example, they're not going anywhere. They're only getting more and more popular. And so at some point, I'm going to have to figure out, okay, where can I incorporate this into a GPU review video? And how does that make sense? And I'm honestly looking for feedback. So please let me know in the comment section below how you would expect to see those technologies demonstrated in future videos. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about these benchmarks. First up, we have Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I'm using the in-game built-in benchmark. And on the left-hand side at native 1440p, you can see we're averaging around 115 FPS, give or take. And our 1% lows are just below 80 FPS. Meanwhile, at native 4K, we're averaging around 70 FPS. And our 1% lows are barely above 50 FPS. And so that's a dip that you would definitely notice in game in a competitive shooter like Black Ops 6. So Black Ops 6 would be something that at 4K, if you're going to play at 4K, you might want to take advantage of DLSS and turning down the in-game settings. Next up is Assassin's Creed Mirage. Again, I'm using the in-game built-in benchmark, and at native 1440p, we're averaging around 120 FPS with our 1% lows around 90 FPS, give or take. And at native 4K, we're averaging around 73 FPS with our 1% lows just below 60 FPS. And so this is a similar result to what we just saw with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Now, the 4070 Super's temperatures here are looking really great. At 1440p, we're at 62, 63C, and at 4K, we're at 65 to 66C. And the 4070 Super has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And as you can see, we're not getting anywhere near that number with these two resolutions in this game. So more than enough VRAM to go go around. And while there are some dips below 99%, for the most part, the GPU is at 99% utilization, so that 7700X here is pairing quite well with the 4070 Super. Next up is Forza Horizon 5. It is the oldest game on this list, and because of that, I maxed it out with the Extreme preset, which does include ray tracing. And at native 1440p, you can see we are averaging around 134 to 135 FPS, and at 4K, we're averaging just above 100 FPS. At 4K, the 1% lows are around 90 FPS, and at 1440p, the 1% lows are around 108 FPS. And again, the 4070 Super is looking great on temperatures here. At 1440p, we're at 64 to 65C, and at 4K, we're at 67 to 68C, give or take. And again, we have that same 98 to 99% GPU utilization. Overall, this is great performance in this game. And surprisingly, the VRAM here, even at 4K with ray tracing, is not cracking above 8 gigabytes, which is kind of impressive. So the 12 gigabyte limit here on the 4070 Super is more than enough for Forza Horizon 5. Next up is CyberPunk 2077. This is the Ultra preset with no ray tracing and no upscaling. And at 1440p, we're averaging around 90 FPS with 1% lows just below 70 FPS, give or take. And at 4K, I would definitely call this unplayable in my opinion. We're averaging around 48 FPS with a 1% low around 40 FPS. And so CyberPunk 2077 with a 4070 Super is something I would definitely recommend staying at 1440p and maybe looking to take advantage of frame generation and DLSS. The 4070 Super here is working a little bit harder, coming in around 68C on the temperatures, but still more than acceptable. We do have a strong 99% GPU utilization, and the VRAM utilization never cracks above 7.5 gigabytes. I had a special request for this one. This is God of War Ragnarok. It's the first time I've ever used it in my benchmarks, and at native 1440p, you can see we're averaging around 137 FPS with a 1% low of 117 FPS, and at 4K, we're averaging 74 FPS with a 1% low of 66 FPS. And the 4070 Super here is coming in around 67 to 68C on the thermals, and that GPU utilization is strong at 100% GPU utilization. And at 4K, where the textures are more demanding, the VRAM is not cracking above 7.5 gigabytes. It's barely hitting 7.4 gigabytes. And so overall, the 4070 Super is more than capable of handling God of War Ragnarok. Next up is Hogwarts Legacy, and this is the ultra quality preset, and I'm running around Hogsmeade here. And so at native 1440p, the average FPS is 93 FPS, give or take, but the 1% lows here are looking horrible, barely breaking 50 FPS and sometimes dipping below. And of course, at native 4K, it's even worse with an average FPS of about 50 FPS, and the 1% lows here hitting as low as 29 FPS. And the GPU temperatures between 67 and 68 to 69C, and the VRAM here is the highest that we've seen it so far at 4K, coming in just a little bit above 11 gigabytes. And the overall GPU utilization is around 97 to 99%, but it mostly hovers around 97, 98%, give or take. Hogwarts Legacy is a game that has always struggled with strong optimization issues, particularly on the ultra quality preset. And so this is a game that does very well when you enable DLSS and frame generation. Next up is another new title in my benchmarking suite. This is Indiana Jones in the Great Circle. And as you can see, our GPU utilization here is sitting strong at 100% with a little bit of a dip to 99, but not by much. The 4070 Super is coming in at 68C on the thermals, so that's not too bad. And at native 1440p, we're averaging 100 FPS with a 1% low of 83 FPS. And at native 4K, we're averaging 61 FPS with a 1% low of 54 FPS. So overall, definitely playable. And again, this is on the ultra quality preset. Now, believe it or not, the highest quality preset on Indiana Jones is called Supreme, but I actually ran into a VRAM limitation here. And so that forced me down to the quality below that, which is called Very Ultra. It's a bit of a weird name. I haven't really seen that one before, but overall, this game's a little bit challenging to benchmark because you're constantly going in and out of cutscenes. So you play a little bit, hit a cutscene, play a little bit, hit a cutscene, but I did the best I could here with the opening sequence. And overall, it's definitely playable on both resolutions, but ideally you're going to have a better experience at 1440p. Next up is Space Marine 2, and we're averaging around 100 FPS, give or take, at native 1440p. 1440p with a 1% low around 76 FPS. And at native 4K, we're averaging around 48 FPS with a 1% low of 42 FPS. And the GPU utilization is at 98 to 99%. The 4070 Super is coming in between 67 and 69C on the high end. The VRAM here isn't barely breaking above 9 gigabytes in total, so we still have room to spare there. Unfortunately, this is a game I would not recommend playing at 4K. However, if you did play it at 4K, you would absolutely need to take advantage of something like DLSS. And now we're going back to Hogwarts Legacy, and this is 1440p. On the left is native 1440p. It's the results we've already looked at. But on the right, I have now enabled DLSS quality with frame generation enabled. And as you can see, the frame rate is significantly better across the board. The active frame rate's better, the average frame rate is significantly higher, and the 1% lows are also noticeably higher as well. Whereas before, we were struggling to maintain 50 FPS on the 1% lows. Now we're well above 60 FPS on our 1% lows. So overall, the gameplay experience is noticeably better in a game like Hogwarts Legacy when you choose to use things like DLSS and frame generation. The tools are there if you want to use them. Again, this really does come down to a game optimization issue. And now we need to talk about my final thoughts, pricing, and some miscellaneous items. So sometimes people will ask me, hey, how do you benchmark a GPU? How can I see my frame rate and all the other stats on the screen? And the short answer is there are a bunch of tools out there, free applications that will allow you to do that. In today's video, I ended up using MSI Afterburner. However, Asus does have their own tool called GPU Tweak 3. It's for free. Anybody can use it, and it's basically the exact same thing. It will allow you to see all of your stats on your GPU and even some stats on your CPU, and you can see your frame rate and customize it. And it's a pretty cool tool. And again, it's completely free. Anybody can use it. I did mean to use it in today's video, and honestly, I've been using MSI Afterburner for so long, I just fired it up without even thinking about it. But in the future, I do plan to test out GPU Tweak 3 a little bit more. Now, in addition to that, we got to talk about pricing really quickly. Yes, Nvidia did set the price at $599 US MSRP. However, what you have to understand is that number one, this is an all-white GPU, and number two, it is an AIB partner model GPU. So no, it is not coming in at $599. Rather, the price for this is $629.99, and at the time of filming, it is still available on Amazon for purchase for that price. However, a few things to point out here. Number one, it is CES 2025. New GPUs are literally getting announced today, so the price may come down. So I'll have a link to it in the description below if you want to check it out. But yeah, the price may come down if you're interested in an all-white GPU. And look, in the grand scheme of things, I don't really think a $30 premium over the Nvidia asking price is really all that bad, because it is an all-white GPU. And usually in the world of PC components, white components do cost a little bit more than their black counterparts, simply because they are harder to get right in the manufacturing process. They show all the flaws and blemishes and things of that nature. Basically, it takes more time and money to get it right. So that makes sense. And then number two, it is an AIB partner model. And yes, while some AIBs try to target that Nvidia asking price, most AIBs, especially on the models that they're really putting extra effort into, they're going to ask for a little bit more money over the Nvidia asking price, because at the end of the day, it's a business and they have to get their slice of the pie. I understand it. I'm not mad at them. I totally get it. At the end of the day, it is a 4070 Super. It is great at 1440p gaming. I do think it's a really good card overall. I had zero issues using it. All of my benchmarks ran flawlessly. Nothing crashed, not even one time. And yes, I did a lot of testing. And the 0 dB mode that Asus added to this card is actually pretty cool. It's a very quiet card. You're not going to hear it. And in the grand scheme of things, it's only pulling in 220 watts. So I can't really complain about the card. The bigger issue right now is that yes, new GPUs are literally about to launch. And on top of that, there are more GPUs to choose from than ever before, and virtually at almost every single price point. So yeah, you may want to sit on this one for a bit, watch the Amazon link, see if that price goes down. If you're interested in a truly all-white GPU, not a partially white GPU, not a mostly white GPU, but an all-white GPU that is great at 1440p, then I can definitely recommend it. And ultimately, the price is really going to be up to what you're comfortable with paying. Anyway, look, I got to get out of here. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do me a favor, hit that like button because it goes a long way in helping me out. If you're new, get subscribed. And until next time, E-Rock out.